Hello everyone and welcome to our second masterclass on the process fundamentals. My name is Marius and I'm the WorkPool product architect and I'll be hosting the session today. Just a kind reminder to please keep all audio on mute. There will be an opportunity for some questions and answers, and at that point you're welcome to enable your video and also audio. For those who didn't join the first session, there's quite a few new people today. This is session number 2 of 4, and our goal here is to basically go through all the process fundamentals, all the building blocks you need to build processes, and the goal with that is then to up at one level by adding web forms and triggers and things in the future sessions. We made this one an hour. We should be done before then, but just to give us a bit more time because we always seem to run out of time in the previous sessions. And just a reminder, or for those who didn't join the first one, basically we're building a simple review process, annual review. The idea is that you can take from that the concepts and go build it in your own environment. And then please do invest the time and effort to upskill yourself with what we go through in these sessions, because it means that by the next session in 3 weeks' time, 3 or 4 weeks, you'll be able to just activate your web forms and triggers and be able to use things like email templates right off the bat. And then lastly, just a reminder that it's not possible for us to cram all the WorkPool process development skills and things into a few short sessions. There is a WorkPool process development course, and it would be important that you actually attend that and invest the time and effort in upskilling yourself if you want to go deeper into expressions and logic and automate a bit further. So for today, we're going to focus on basically 2 things, the process attributes and then teaching you what you need to know around conditions and expressions. I'm going to just spend very quickly a minute or so on recapping what we did in the first session and then dive directly into the process attributes. These sessions are being recorded. They're on our YouTube channel as well. And obviously the benefit of that is that you can watch them and refer to the sections that we cover when you're at that point, and then there's no rush for you. I will, excuse me, pause once or twice just if you have any questions. There's a Q&A section as well, so please do pop some questions on there, or if you get lost, please do let us know. We'd like you to be fully up to speed by the end of the session with the things you need to know and things you need to do in terms of getting your processes deployed. The homework we had for today was to go and review the previous session if you didn't attend, to then actually go identify and document the process or processes that you would like to build. Obviously, it's better if you can apply what you learn here in your own environment, so go basically get your hands dirty and document things in a way that makes sense to you, for you to secure some developer environment where you've got a place to play, and then to play. There's just no substitute for experience, and you need to make mistakes, you need to get frustrated, because once you've done that, it's easy to grow from there. So please do use the time and the place that you have to go and play, because the more you do it, the easier it gets. Reminder for those of you who don't know that you can find these masterclasses and other recordings on the @WorkPool TV channel on YouTube. Okay, so what we did last time is we went through the process, or my process if you like, of how I would typically document a process. I like to do it on paper. You can do it in Excel, you can do it on Visio, any type of tool that you like. Step 1 is forget about WorkPool. Go and listen, look, document, understand, so that whatever you produce will be practical. In my example, I'm using the annual review or annual renewal, and I stepped you through the process of an assistant with a advisor, and the assistant was preparing certain documents, and then the advisor would have a meeting with the client, and post that there would be certain administration happening. What we did is we took those notes and we created an Excel document where we mapped the tasks as we would want them to kick off in WorkPool, and we identified certain fields and things that we would like to collect as we go. And we just wrapped up to say that those basically are the three building blocks of processes. You have the flows, which basically would be task templates. These will ultimately become tasks. You have these gold lines, yellow lines called transitions, and those are the rules that bind these tasks together. You can add conditions, and that's what we'll be doing today. And then the attributes or fields would be the bits and pieces of information that you want to collect as you go through the process. And then what we call the process definition or the process template basically is all of these things together. And it's the process definition in its entirety that you would typically export from your developer environment and then import on production. And as part of my own homework for today, I just expanded or put some more meat to the bones in terms of the process. You'll notice it's essentially exactly the same. I've just made two changes or enhancements. I've extracted the attributes to be a bit more specific in terms of what I would like to collect at each one of these steps. And you'll notice at the bottom, I've put 2 extra tasks in place. These are optional tasks, and we'll go through the logic you can apply in if you want to have loops or if you want to kick off certain tasks only under certain conditions in WorkPool, then I'll show you how to do that. The process of identifying and extracting your attributes, again, has got nothing to do with WorkPool. It shouldn't be brain surgery. You just go document exactly what fields you would like the person to update or add at each step. Some attributes might pop up in multiple tasks. And then using the standard WorkPool syntax for required fields, compulsory fields are in black and optional ones in blue. I just created a list of all the attributes that I want to add to my process, identified the types, which we'll cover in a short while. And I've just confirmed some of the turnaround times here. You'll notice that different tasks will be going to different people. At the end, once the advisor has had the meeting with the client, it might be that not all the work that they've done is part of the standard retainer or service. Maybe they're doing some legal work, or maybe they're creating a will. Then they have the option to tick a box and say, yes, I would like to actually invoice the client for this, and that will go to the accounts and billing group. I've also just for today created an email template I've linked, and we're going to cover this in the next session, the automation and the triggers, but just to show you at least, or give you a heads up in terms of what's coming. And let's just run through these attributes. So the first step is the consult planning and preparation. This one goes to the assistant who's got 1 week to complete the work. I've identified 4 attributes I'd like to add to this flow. The one is any significant notes from the previous review. So we want to spare the advisor the time and effort of going through the previous year and going and looking at all the documents or the previous process. And basically the assistant can just quickly document some important notes. Then we said in this example, we actually like the assistant to just check in with the advisor if they have any specific requests or preferences for this client for this annual review, and then document that. So we made that compulsory to basically force the assistant to at least ask that question. And in my example, it's hypothetically a big team of people, and there might be a pool of assistants, and they might be doing work for different advisors. So in this case, I'm actually telling the assistant to identify who the primary or the advisor will be that will be attending to this client. And I'm doing that so I can show you how to target and allocate work to people that you choose, depending on different conditions. Now, in this process, I'm using an advisor attribute. It's called a resource attribute. But if you do the process development training, there's actually quite a few expressions that you can use to target different people. It could be that if the assistant reports to the advisor, so in the WorkPool terminology in terms of reports to, you can actually target the line manager of someone. That's one of the options. And in most cases, you can actually have an advisor on record on the directory for this client, and then you don't need to specify it. You can pull that directly from the directory as well. So I'm just playing around with some options here. You would obviously code the process in a way that makes sense in your environment and based on what you've got. And then I've put in the primary email address for the client that we want to use for communication. Normally, you would already have this on the directory, so you wouldn't need to put it in again. You can just link it to the directory. I've put it in now so that I can show you that you can actually make the same attribute compulsory or optional at different steps in the process. And also because we actually want to trigger email notifications to go out or emails to go out to the client in the next session. So that was the first task. The next one would be for the assistant to make contact with the client. At this point, we actually get them to confirm the date and time of the consultation. And that's important because I've queued it up in a way that these due dates that follow this task will automatically adjust based on the meeting time with the client. So that's just put in there for to show you an example of how to do that. And then at this point, as I mentioned, same number 4 will actually be compulsory. So you can chop and change that as you need to, same attribute, different places on the process. Step number 3 is for the confirmation and pre-consult preparation. So this is where the assistant might go in and pull the latest portfolio information, might get the latest policy schedule, might obtain quotations or things that the advisor requested as part of the preliminary work. And then if there were any final comments or notes, then that can be documented here, which means that by the time the advisor gets the task, they can just get a quick recap or quick review on what they need to know. Following that, we have the advisor's task. And again, so the way that this process was coded is the advisor's actually got minimal touch points, only one task in this whole process. Very often in the accounting space, you get the same thing where let's say the partner will only be involved in 2 or 3 steps in the, whatever 30-step process. And depending on the way that you work, if you have a much more hands-on advisor, they could be participating much earlier on on WorkPool. If you have an advisor that's maybe not too technologically focused, you can limit that to only 1 or 2 tasks. And sometimes even the assistant can complete this task on their behalf. There is an option for that in WorkPool where you can enable a personal assistant to complete tasks on behalf of another party. What I've done in this example is I say for the advisor, what I'd like him or her to do is record the minutes of the meeting and attach that, or specify a document with a record of advice or whatever it might be. If this was a financial plan, then they would export that and attach that PDF or whatever the portfolio would be. This typically could be printed and also emailed to the client. If they have any special notes or instructions or next actions that need to be done that they want to pass on to the assistant, then they can do that here. And then I've just put in 2 checkboxes to say, is a follow-up meeting required? It might be that they need to have let's say, a meeting with the spouse to do the will or something. If they tick that box, then a follow-up meeting task will be kicked off within 2 days. And then if there's any specific invoicing or billing work to be done, they can tick that box and it goes through to the accounts and billing department. So as you can see, not really WorkPool specific. I'm just designing my process with my tasks and the fields, the flow of it, and I'm putting it in an order that's going to make sense in practice. Obviously, you can apply this in many different ways to add loops, to kick things off sooner, and whatever I'm doing on the attributes, you can obviously choose whatever is applicable to you. Right. So these attributes, what are they and what do we have available in WorkPool? Well, there's lots. And some of them actually have different call it permutations that might apply. So a very common one is a string, which is just a single line text box. That's where you can put in things like names, surnames, job title, etc. And just Whatever I'm showing you here is not unique to the process. You might already know all of this. The nice thing is that in WorkPool, these attributes are shared between the processes and the directory views and also the web forms. So you only need to conquer and learn this once, and you'll be able to use it in all those places in WorkPool. So the string is quite popular. It's a free text field. The text one is a multi-line free text field. So that's where you can put in notes and comments. It can take up to 65,000 characters. So it really can take a lot. It's not unlimited, but yeah, it can take quite a bit of content. Then we have a date and date time attribute option. If you want to have a birthday date, review date, next annual review date, you can use the date attribute. And then date and time would be for something like a consultation. Obviously, on a view, the time is less relevant, but on a process, sometimes the time can be quite useful. Integer and decimal numbers, so those go together. Integer is a whole number, so how many kids do they have would be an integer. Decimal is anything with a fraction, so rands and cents, dollars, could be percentage, commission, etc. You can document as a decimal, and depending on your format settings, these will be displayed differently also when you're viewing the screens. And then one that's quite popular is your Boolean, the checkbox, to either say yes or no, or true or false. And I'm going to use this one in the logic that we are doing today. But all of these can be used in the logic. And then the other ones would be email address. So email address looks like a normal free text field, except we will actually validate and confirm that it does have a valid email address. You can only put in one email address at a time because you want to perhaps target this or use this in communications. If you need multiple email addresses, then you just put email address 1, email address 2, and you can add a number of ones in there. Mobile number, again, this is tied to a text message service. So depending on the message gateway that you're using, it might be certain formats that apply, like in terms of country codes or without. And you can in WorkPool target specifically those mobile numbers, and WorkPool will validate it as well. Then on the phone numbers and addresses, on phone numbers, you get two types. You get one without the country code and one with the country code. If all of your clients or numbers are local, then you don't need the country code. If you're often dialing people overseas, then you can just switch it to an international phone number, and then you get the country dial code that you can add at the front. Addresses, similar. You get 3 lines, the postal code, and then either the province or the state, depending on your jurisdiction. And then if you choose international, you get the country code, country code or country name here. So most people will either do it this way where they type in the country, but that's only if they're using WorkPool to print things to actually go out with physical post. The other option is to create an option where you can select the country, and then you can use that more accurately in terms of reports, which I'll show you shortly. And then obviously another popular one is the attachment or URL. If you want to attach any voice recording or PDF or Excel document in WorkPool, you would say that's an attachment. We call it a URL because it could also be a link like a website address. Last bunch of attributes, you have an option attribute, and what people might not know is you actually have 4 types of options. You have the single select. So if you have a company and you want to specify the company type, it's either going to be a closed corporation or PTY, etc. So there's a single select, single drop down. This could be language, language preference. You can choose that there. You have the multi-select one where you can use control and left click. So if you're let's say a multidisciplinary practice and you provide multiple services, you can either have checkboxes for those, or you can have a single list of all of your different services and you can tick the ones that apply, which again can be used in reports. Then you also get 2 tree or hierarchy based options. The one is a single select where you can actually drill down to a certain point. So let's say you will have a geographical location, you might have a country, and in the country you have different provinces or jurisdictions. The option 3, hierarchy single select one, basically allows you to drill down and select a specific value, but only one value, where the multi-select one actually allows you to drill down and select multiple values. So this one is quite nice for if you have a group of products that's available and you want to tick which products this client currently has in their portfolio. Then, and normally these option lists are actually backed by what we call linked lists. So you might not know, but in the directory, there's a linked list section where you can define the options that your company is using most often. So you don't want to, for example, repeat the list of country codes every time you create a new process. We have to copy and paste them. And in WorkPool, you have this concept of a linked list that you can use, and then it will basically, whenever you update that single list, will update all the places in WorkPool where you are using that list. So I'd recommend if you are going to be reusing it, especially in multiple places, that you use a linked list to combine that. Then the directory entry. So this one is nice if you want to link or refer to associated entries. You can even use this in the process to kick off tasks in other folders. So if you, let's say, have a spouse or it's a director of a different company, you can link those and target them in the process. And you can even pull data from those ones directly. And then the last one is your resource, which you have 3 types. You have the normal user, external resource, and then also the resource group. So depending on what you want to do, you would just have to choose the appropriate one there. Then just the last thing before I actually add a few attributes is for the next session, we are going to show you how to link your process attributes to your view attributes. That's only possible if the type of the attribute is the same. So you can't link a mobile number to an email address or an integer to a date. So just keep that in mind in your design. You can't take something that's a string and then say, okay, I want to make this a decimal now. So in your design, already keep in mind where you might want to push this to, because those types do need to match up. Okay, so just to make it practical, taking my spreadsheet, I showed you the attributes that I've created, and like with the previous session, it's really a copy and paste exercise. When I'm adding an attribute, I have 4 fields that are required, and I'll show you what they look like. The display name is what the people on WorkPool will see. So that's kind of the public value. And I think that's limited to either 100 or 150 characters. Obviously, it's a field name. You don't want to write too long a message. There is an optional description field, which you can actually, if someone hovers their mouse over a field, you can have a pop-up that will give them additional information. So you can use that. It's optional. It's quite useful if you have new staff, things like a FICA document. If you say, proof of address must be, not older than 3 months, must be of this type, and kind of your various things that people need to remember. You can put that in the description, and when they hover their mouse over it, it will actually tell them that. The display order is where in this whole list of attributes would I like this attribute to be displayed. And in most cases, you do it kind of top down as you progress through the process you complete it. The attribute type obviously is important. Depending on what you choose here, you might see different values that pop up. And then just the one that you need to think about is the attribute name. So this one will not be visible to the end user. This is your private name, basically, that you will refer to if you are going to be using it in any expressions. So keep it short. There are some restrictions in terms of you can't use a dot or a space. It must be a single concatenated value. There are some other rules and things which we go into the normal training sessions on. But if you click on save, it will warn you, so you're not going to be able to make a mistake. Just make sure that if it does give you a warning, just simplify it, and that should help you. Okay, so let's jump over to WorkPool quickly, and let's go to the process designer. Okay, admin, this is the process we built last time that I've just fleshed out a little bit more. And we're going to look at the attributes. So after I do the diagram, I normally close that. I go to the attributes screen, and this is where I document and copy and paste from Excel. So if I had my Excel document open, I would basically go in here, I'll copy that, and I'm going to add an attribute, paste it in there. My display order just is 1, so I don't have to think about it every time. And then depending on the type here, I would choose the most appropriate value. So you might notice if you pick things like date, extra options might appear. So if this is the birthday, it would make sense that you can only allow past dates. You can't have a future birthday. So in terms of quality of information, there are some options that will pop up and apply on a URL, for example. You can say, I only want to accept uploaded files. So I'm not going to allow people to jipper the system. They must actually attach a document in this step. So go through them, have a look. There are different things that will pop up depending on what you use. And you just go through your list, you copy and paste, and ultimately you end up with an attribute list that matches what you have in Excel. Okay, so once that's done, let's go back to my presentation. So you can either at this point start linking your attributes to the flows, which I'm not going to do yet. I'm just going to go into the conditions and expressions, and then I'm going to show you how to apply those rules. But you'll notice I've already linked some of them. So actually, let me just do that now. So in case you want to know how that works, here's my process. And basically, as you're working through this, you'll say, okay, for my consult planning and preparation. So here's my spreadsheet. And what I want to do now is I want to link the 4 attributes to this task. And I'm going to link the 2 attributes over here to this task. So I go onto the process designer, I right click and I say set my attribute actions. That's going to show me a pop-up like this one. And now I can tell WorkPool, okay, on flow A over here, I want to make the following 4 attributes appear and be visible for the person to act on. And I can actually control which ones are required. So if I don't tick this box, then the field will be blue. And if I tick the box, it will be black and the process will not be able to continue without it. So just to quickly check, I say the significant notes is optional and primary email address is optional. And yes, significant notes is optional and email address is optional. And I click on save and I can close that window. So that's how I link specific attributes there. Let's do the same for this one, attribute actions. And now I'm going to set the date and time for the meeting and also the primary email address. In this case, I'm going to make both required now because I'm going to be using that in my logic further down. Then, just so you know, you can also pull attributes through even if they have no action required. So if I have my attribute actions, you can also say that, and let's go to the one with the advisor. So for the advisor, even though they have certain things that they need to complete, I might actually want to show them all the values that someone's filled in already. So I'll just say attribute actions. And what I can do here is I can pull in the latest portfolio, the supporting documents, all of that as read. So it means the advisor can look, but he or she is not able to update that. But what I want from them is to fill in these attributes. So you just go through every step and you pick and choose the appropriate permission and you say whether it is required or not. And if you tick that box, they will not be able to continue on the process without completing that information. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So that's after you've done your attributes, you link the attributes to a flow. And as I said, you can link the same attribute to multiple flows if you like. Then getting on to the, call it coding, really it's the only part that might be a bit different or unique to WorkPool. What is it when we say an expression or a formula? Basically, it's giving WorkPool a piece of text like you would do in Excel to say, take this formula, do something with it and give me a result. All of the conditions will either have a yes or a no, a true or a false answer. And that is what we use in these attributes and logic at the bottom over here. And you'll notice that the syntax in WorkPool is if there's a solid line, normally it means it will always happen. So it will always go from C to D. And then whenever you see a dotted line, it means that there is a condition attached to it. So it may or it may not go there. In this case, if the follow-up is true, go down here. If there was no follow-up, the answer would be false and this task would never kick off. So whatever you write down, your result will either have a true or false, and that's how you determine down which route the process might go. And how it works is you use your attributes, you take the values, and then you have some kind of operator on it. So I can say, assuming there's an attribute called age, and let's say the advisor's put in 30, then I can say to WorkPool, is the age bigger or equal to 18? Yes, then go down that route. If this was a drop-down, maybe if there was gender, I can say, is the value on the process was selected as female. So I can say in my condition, is the gender equal to male? No, so the answer is false. So obviously you could have one value go down a female route and the other one down a male route. Then as per the one we're going to do, is an invoice or billing required? If true, then, so in this case, the box was checked, but the condition was if it's false. So actually, no, true is not equal to false. So therefore, this condition will not execute. And these are the things you'll pick up and play with and experiment with on the test server until you get it right. So it's 100% fine to get these things wrong. WorkPool will tell you, or there will be an error, and you will just fix it until you get it right. Last one is, let's say you're using a risk score. Maybe the result was 17. You can ask WorkPool, okay, is this risk score bigger or equal to 12? If yes, then go down the one route. There might be another one less than 12, and then it goes down the other route. So you can pick and choose all of that. I've just put in another one here as an example. So you can also have not just equal to, but also not equal to. So the syntax for that is exclamation and equal. So it's not equal to. The nationality on the process is South African. I'm saying, is it not American? Then it is true. And then just a heads up, which is something we go into more detail on the normal process development training, is you can also combine these conditions in multiple, like add multiple conditions in one expression. And if it hasn't dawned, basically the attributes equals variables, and that is what you use in your conditions. So just simplifying that a little bit more, if these green text sections were attributes, then basically in WorkPool, the way that you tell it to treat it as a variable is you put it inside a dollar curly bracket. So that's how WorkPool will know that you're not saying age as a string, as a text value. You actually want WorkPool to go take the value that's in the age attribute and compare that to 18. So you can just code it first using your normal names. And then when you're done, you just go copy paste dollar curly bracket in front and curly bracket at the end. So in this example, I've got spaces here to make it a bit more visible, but you wouldn't normally have spaces around it. But that's how you identify a variable or an attribute as opposed to a normal piece of string in WorkPool. And then you might have noticed that almost all of the operators here are 2 characters, like bigger or smaller than, not equal to, etc. So equal in WorkPool actually is a double equal. And whenever you specify or use it in a rule, you just put a double equal, and in WorkPool it means that you want to compare the value on the left to the value on the right. So that really is the most technical section on process development. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, go have a look, ask questions, and definitely just try it and see what happens. If you're not working in a production environment, obviously you have an opportunity to make a mistake, and that's okay. So how would we use this in our process? Let's add that quickly. So just a tip, I would normally actually open the attributes in a separate screen because I want to just copy and paste these names because the case and the spelling does matter when you are going to be referring to these attributes. So I'm going to say, okay, follow up. I'm going to go into my designer here, click this transition helpers button that will show you blue bubbles that appear. I can right click on this one that's going towards the left for a follow-up meeting. I can say edit the condition, and that's basically where I put in my condition. So a Boolean means that it's either going to be true or false, and the attribute name is follow-up. So all I've got to do is just put it in my dollar curly brackets. Right. And then for the one on the right-hand side, let's go back here, copy billing, put it in there, click on save. You'll notice both has turned into dotted lines, which means there's a condition. You can either hover your mouse over it to see what it is, or click the conditions button, and it will show you what that is without having to go into it. Okay, so that is how you specify a condition on a transition. Obviously, we're using quite a simple process here, but there could be many loops, could be multiple transitions. You could have quite complicated conditions here, but it's really up to you in terms of how you design and create that process. Okay. So we've done this bit already. I've just put it in here for reference later on. You can, on any flow, right click, choose attribute actions, and you'll have a place to update those attributes. And basically we're done. We've done the flows, done the transitions, we've done the attributes, we've linked them up. So let's test and see what happens. Okay. While you're busy designing, the process is not going to be active, it's inactive. You don't want something to be available to other people until you're happy and you're ready. So I will click on this version, and I've got to go down and just click the activate button. So if I click activate, it will change it to yes, and this is now available for me in the start task screen. So I can say I want to add my annual review. It's for an individual, Mr. Fox. And I click on save. Yes, I'm sure. It's picked up that I'm the person to do the first task on this. So I've already received the first task in my workflow. And here we go. These are these attributes that we copied and pasted and selected and put in from the spreadsheet onto WorkPool. I will click on the blue bubble. And as per the rules, you can see some of them are black and some are optional. So it's 100% in match with what we've done there. And also if you hover your mouse over these fields, it will pop up with additional information. So no notes. Special notes, get a quote for AI hedge fund investment. Advisor performing it. So especially if you're testing, I've left these flexible because when you test it, you want to run through a number of combinations. I normally only set the assignment at the end because while I'm testing, I want to be able to quickly mark tasks as complete without having to log out, log in, log out, log in as different people while I'm testing. And then primary email address, I'm going to skip for now. Click on update. It's confirmed there are my values recorded in the audit trail. It'll show me the next step in the process. Say submit. There we go. Contact client to set up consultation. Again, there's all my details. You'll notice I've actually got an email template icon that's appeared here, which we'll discuss in the next session, where you can have predefined email templates to reach out to that client, and it will pre-populate the content in those email templates. So in this case, I'm going to say the primary email address is actually now required. What's fox@gmail.com. com, and the date and time of the consult is going to be, let's say, the 8th at 10 o'clock. Okay, and I'm going to go through to the pre-consult step now. Confirmation and pre-consult. So you'll notice that it's actually made this task 2 business days, or due 2 business days before the 8th, which is correct because there's a weekend in between. So my assistant has got, you know, exact dates to work with when they're planning and working in their task list in WorkPool. And now in this case, I'm going to attach a document. So they might have gone and created a quote or received some information. Let me just drag and drop that on there. Let's do it on that one because it's compulsory, and there's no final notes, or perhaps I can say could not find any AI info. Okay. Right, job's done. I can see the next one is going to be going through to the advisor. So this is the first time the advisor is actually getting their task. It's automatically calculated to be in line with the consultation. And they now get the benefit of viewing all the information that's been filled in so far. They can click on the links, open the documents, and now their job would be to actually complete the remaining tasks. So let's just add whatever information was required. So let me just put in some fake documents here. Okay, special notes or instructions. Let's set up a meeting to review the will. Okay, is a follow-up meeting required? Yes. Are we going to invoice? No. So let me just update that. You'll notice at the bottom of this task, it will actually show you, depending on what you select here at the top, what's going to happen next. So I can say, in this case, I am going to have a follow-up meeting, and the post-consult will happen anyway. But if I ticked the invoice box as well and say update, you'll notice that my invoice 1 will appear as well. So it's a good way to, if your expressions maybe is not 100% right, you'll pick it up already when you're designing and testing your process by looking and seeing what the next steps will be. Right, advisor is done, and there we can see all 3 tasks have kicked off on the process. So really that's it. You can always go back and look at this little yellow icon, and it will also show anyone else who's looking what the rules might be and the current state that each one of these tasks are in. That button is only available on the container task, the main task of the process. And I know for some of you, you've actually got your own custom overlays on processes. So obviously this link is only available if you're using the standard WorkPool screens for that. Okay. I'm not sure if there are any questions at this point. Yeah, I'm going to go through just the typical order. If there is anyone, Daniel, that's got a question or feel they're lost or they want to just know something more about the attributes, it would be good for them to just let me know or ask. If not, then obviously I'm going to wrap up.
No question at the moment, but yeah, if anybody does have any questions.
Good stuff. You can queue them up so long. So how do I typically approach these processes? What have I found that's kind of working best for me? As I said, step 1, forget about WorkPool, go document the process. So you are doing things in a certain way already. You might have certain requirements that you have to adhere to already. So just go document them. Once you've done that, then map that process to WorkPool. If you're not going to build it yourself, at least by doing it this way, whatever document you're handing over to the process builder, they don't have to think about it and they can just follow the rules that you've specified. So I normally like to plot it out. I want to get all my process blocks there, and I just want to add to transitions. So I'm not even going to add any conditions to it. I'm just going to connect the dots. Then I'm going to create my attributes. So as I did in the session, literally copy and paste from my Excel, and it's okay. You can rename them after the fact if the name doesn't make sense. It's not the end of the world. You can change those. Keep in mind the variable names or the attribute names. If you want to use them in transitions, this would help quite a lot. Then right at the end, I add my transition logic. The reason I do this last is because as I'm going through and thinking and plotting these things, I might realize that I've missed some attributes, or I need to ask the question, is billing required, earlier on. So I'm kind of working as I'm designing on getting this finalized and only adding my logic right at the end, because that way I don't have any rework in the process. Whether you did it before or after, don't forget to link your attributes to the flows, and that will just make sure that the people are forced to fill in whatever information you need. And then I test and demo. And it's a very good idea to actually demo it to the team before you make it live. In most cases, someone will say, but what about this? What about that? But you forgot about this. So you don't want to have to deploy a process, then go back and do it again. So testing and demo really is highly recommended, especially if you're involving multiple people or a big team. And then once all of this is done, which is something we'll look at in the next session, is you can then at that point finalize the who's going to be doing what, how long do they have, what email triggers or HTTP triggers or SMS triggers do I want to tie to it, what are my email templates, and then what, if any, steps in the process do I actually want to send to the client to complete, and or any links that might go with that. And then once all of that is done, you literally go on to the process. So I'm going to go into my portfolio review. I'm going to click on that one and I say export. And that will then create an XML file. And that is the one that I will then go into my production server, click on import, and I will import that whole process definition into the production server. And then it's a clean process. You can activate it and you can start it immediately. Right, I see there was a question from Leon.
Yep, Leon, you can unmute yourself.
Righto, Marius.
Hi, Leon.
Yes, one thing that tickles me is you started the process and there's a task number, okay? And every time one of the subtasks is doing, there's another task number. In other words, there's not a, so the subtasks, or as the process progress, is not a sub-task number of the original task. They totally create new ones. Is my understanding quite correct?
That is correct. We did go through it briefly in the first session. If this number is significant to you, if this is something that you want to use in these tasks and on all the emails, there is actually an expression. It's called process.instance.id that you can use in the tasks and in the emails. And then any email that goes out or email that comes back in again will automatically identify it based on the primary number. So that's what most people are doing to work around it. We do allocate unique task numbers, you're correct, to each task, but your primary one will never change. And if you want to use that in documentation or correspondence, you can do that.
Okay, so I do have the option for primary number always when I open up, wherever I work with it.
And I think some people, especially if this is like a claim number, as I mentioned, you can actually put that as an expression in the title of the flow. And that will then automatically in your tasks and even in your normal workflow, you can at least have access and sight of that.
Yeah, otherwise you will get lost.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. Thanks, Marius.
All good. I'm not sure if there's any other questions. I just wanted to remind you from the first session, hopefully it makes a bit more sense now, that I said that in your process design, you do get certain standard expressions and things like the process initiator, the manager, and the owner. You just put a $curly bracket around it, and WorkPool will then go put in the right value. And then in my example today, I actually targeted the advisor. So if I go back to my designer, you'll notice that in here, the owner of the task is the advisor and the resource is the advisor. So I can edit that flow. And there is this handy icon where you can actually browse all the different expressions that are available to you. You don't have to go type it in if you don't know it, but I can then target, let's say, the advisor, which is an attribute on the process. You can also see over here that I've put the duration to actually be a formula as well, where I said I want to add 2 days to the consult date and time. So go have a look, play around with that. There's a lot of options here. We do go into a lot more depth in the standard training because, as you might see, there's like reports to options, personal assistants. Yeah, you can link to the directory, etc. I'm not going to go into all of that detail in this masterclass, so that's why you would need to, if you're going to be taking on processes, do the actual course, because my goal with this is to get you to a point where you can do the least amount of work to enable your waveforms and triggers and start doing automation, that at least you can get the benefit from it and then grow from there. I mean, the more you do it, the easier it gets and the more you'll learn in the process as well. Right. Before we say if there's any other questions, the next session will be building on what we've done. So if you want to be ready, get your developer environment up and running, go build your processes, go add some attributes, go test out the logic, because what we're going to be doing next is linking this to the directory. We're going to be looking at email templates. Jackie's created a video that you can watch, which will basically guide you in terms of how to create an email template. So we'll make that available before the next masterclass for you to watch. And then we'll also be discussing triggers. So how do you automatically email a client once you've completed a task, or how do you SMS someone? Let's say you're doing a let's say a deceased estate. How do you keep them informed at different key parts using SMSs? And then also we'll be looking at and giving you a web form template that you can use in interacting with your clients, which obviously helps a lot in terms of Poppy and all other collection of information. Right, so we actually have some time left. If there are any questions, please shout. If not,
We've got one from Zach with regards to the training session on 9 June. Just to confirm, that will this be on Teams, so essentially online?
Correct. It's going to be an online session. And also, for anyone attending that session, we'll be giving you the WorkPool Process Development Training Manual. So you'll be able to take away all the expressions and rules and logic, basically the theory, to study on your own time. There's a lot more intellectual property, that we're not going to go into in these public sessions. That's available to people who have been trained. So definitely worth it if you want to build your own processes. And just again, I mean, I'm not advocating for us to build the processes for you, but in many cases, people get busy. They don't have the time. That's also an option. If you can just document your processes, it saves a lot of time and effort. You can also just ask support and they can give you a quote to say, it's going to take us 2 hours or 3 hours or 1 hour to build this process for you. Give you a quote, they'll build it for you, and away you go. So it's one of the ways to save time and save effort is to get someone else to build it for you. Right, any other questions?
Nope, we don't have anybody else with their hands up, so I think we
Cool.
made it in time today, actually.
Good stuff. So good luck. Obviously, if you do get stuck, you're welcome to email the support team. So if your attribute isn't where it's supposed to be or your expression isn't working the way you think, always make a screenshot of that, because remember, we don't necessarily have access to your workpool. So a screenshot goes a long way in us helping you to check where the problem might be, and they'll be ready to just assist you with that. And in terms of preparation for the next one, it would be important that you actually have processes that you can work with and play with. Otherwise, the web forms and triggers, you're not going to have anything to tie it to. Okay, thank you very much.